The Israeli Prime Minister is due to hold a meeting of his security cabinet today to discuss the second phase of the ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza. On Sunday, Mr. Netanyahu hosted the new US Secretary of State Marco Rubio for talks, with both men praising what they called the bold vision of President Trump's plan to remove Palestinians from Gaza and rebuild the devastated enclave as a result. That plan has been flatly rejected by Palestinians and Arab nations and would also violate international law. Well, let's cross live now to Jerusalem and speak to our Middle East editor, Sebastian Usher. And Sebastian, just tell us what came out of these talks between Marco Rubio and the Israeli Prime Minister.
I think the key element from it was essentially that Marco Rubio, as the new US Secretary of State, was very much standing beside Mr. Netanyahu, fully united in their united aim, as he stated it, to eliminate Hamas. That's what Mr. Netanyahu has been saying throughout the offensive, throughout the war in Gaza. That's his ultimate aim. The issue with that is that in order to move on to a second phase of the ceasefire deal, at some point the conditions are that Israel should have a full withdrawal of its troops from Gaza as part of that phase. And within that, all the remaining hostages in Gaza would also be released. I think this meeting leaves another question mark over whether that will happen as is envisaged in the conditions that were originally set out. And Mr. Netanyahu is due to have a meeting with his security cabinet later today here in Israel, at which he will discuss phase 2. And we've heard from reports in the Israeli media that after that meeting, depending on what the cabinet says, he may then give instructions to an Israeli negotiating team, which is heading to Cairo to talk about phase 1, which still has almost 2 weeks to go, but will maybe give them instructions to start looking at phase 2. Now, those talks on phase 2 were meant to have started around 2 weeks ago now. As far as we know, no substantial negotiations have taken place. So things are up in the air about that. And just to say, there are families, relatives of the hostages in Gaza who are holding demonstrations across Israel today to mark the 500th day of their relatives in captivity in Gaza. I just passed on my way into the bureau here a group of those relatives who have begun a march to the Israeli to the parliament, to the Knesset. And as I say, they are underlining the feeling in Israel that the absolute priority here, beyond anything else, is to ensure that every last Israeli held in Gaza must be released and nothing must get in the way of that. That is at odds to some extent still with what we're hearing from the Israeli government, that there may still be a resumption of the war in Gaza. That might then lead to the failure of the second phase being pursued right to its end.
Sebastian, thank you. That's our Middle East editor, Sebastian Usher. And what you can see at the moment on our screens there are fresh protests that are happening in Tel Aviv, as we're hearing there from Sebastian. Families, friends, supporters of those who are still held in Gaza by Hamas and other militant groups continue to protest, pushing for the Israeli government to release all of those who are still being held in Gaza. But of course, as we're hearing, the Israeli cabinet will be meeting today to discuss the second phase that would see more hostage releases.